who's going to testify. Oh, you need reinforcement, do you,
I
Commissioner?
don't have to. I can do it on my own.
No, you're more than welcome to have Marty come up.
Might be safe for reinforcement.
So, are we live now? All right, so, this is fiscal 2024 budget, we're working on, and we are taking, the testimony from, Commissioner Gresham and Deputy Commissioner Artie Merrill on, Agency of Administration and Finance and Management and the executive offices. And we're doing it on behalf of everyone.
Everyone.
And so.
The governor wanted to come, but he was unavailable.
Would you convey our regards, please? We will, that's housing investments. Do you have a PowerPoint?
Yes.
You've got it on there.
Oh, my gosh.
You want
You don't have to look at it. I don't
Alright.
intend to go through it.
All right.
You will if you want.
No, please, if you want to give us the highlights, we have until 4:30 to go through your presentation. You know how this committee functions, and we only really want to talk to you about kind of the highlights of your budget. You obviously have the benefit of putting it together for all of state government, so you bring that kind of collective perspective. And so if you want to use this as an opportunity to explain the budget and also any information that you think would be helpful to us. I know that I have received this letter.
That's in April.
No, this is the Dear Jane letter, it just came in. Well, I don't know, April, I gotta put my glasses on.
Say- days ago.
Yeah, I guess
Probably.
well, I was thinking.
Just came this week,
Yeah, no, I was thinking.
April 1st.
April 4th.
Oh, that's
Yeah.
April 4th.
What's today, the 6th?
Yeah.
So, I got it yesterday. And
You
maybe,
haven't read it yet?
no, I haven't had a chance to read it. And I suppose you would really like to talk to us about
We'd be
your.
very happy to.
Yeah, I bet. Well, you only have 40 minutes, so perhaps you'll run out of time.
Pretty
Um,
fair.
And so with that, I'm going to turn it over to you, Commissioner, and let you present to us what you would like us to know about your budget and what you think about where we are in the budget process, I guess.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Adam Gresham, Commissioner of Finance and Management.
Corey Merrill, Deputy Commissioner of Finance and Management.
And also introducing Holly Anderson, Jason Pinard, who you guys have seen here many times before. They are AOA Financial, and they pay the bills, and actually they draw up our budget too. So they do a lot of work in that regard. So what I thought I would do is look at what kind of our budget, what the House did, which might give you a sense of where we are.
Do they actually amend your budget?
They did not touch finance and management nor the executive office. They did have some changes in AOA, two of which I was going to highlight, both of which we not only agree with, but we would have, they were frankly oversights on our part, and they should have been in our budget.
So you support them.
So yes, we do.
And what are they?
One of which is the Division of Racial Justice Statistics. That was an oversight, plain and simple, on our part. And that is put into the Agency of Administration budget that will be working alongside our Director of Racial Equity. And that was as a result of legislation last year. There's $150,000 general fund for that. Keep in mind that probably is on the low side for ongoing, but there was money that was put in last year, about $363 million one time that was really underexpended. So there was fairly substantial carry forward. So we're using that for this year.
It's nothing has been spent out of that appropriation yet. I think the positions are being recruited, so there will be ample carry forward. Yeah.
In addition to that, there was a new section created in the budget for Truth and Reconciliation to fund positions in that initiative. You may remember from last year, I think it was Act 128. They created the Truth and Reconciliation Commission to study the past and come out with recommendations about what to do about it. That was given a $740,000 appropriation, which has been little used. So you'll notice in the budget, there's section B 104.1 for the Truth and Reconciliation Commission that has been established. On that, we agree with the placement of that within the budget. We are frankly a bit mystified as to why it was put into the base budget, being that this is a 3-year commission that with a report due in, I believe, June of 2026, after which time the commission will cease to exist. So we were frankly mystified as to why it became base.
Is that
I
in
think
your
it should have
budget?
been one time.
So we can take it out and give you something else.
We would support that.
I think it was just, a line item was created in the base part of the budget because it needs ongoing support for the duration of it. Whether or not it's counted in the total of the base. So
And the employees in limited service. Anyway, it just, our recommendation would be to put, by all means, put in the budget, but we would put it in a one-time section.
There's also technical things having to do with accounting and setting up a new business unit, for example, if it's not going to be an ongoing a department. So that's our preference, but we agree completely with the amount. In fact, the finance and management provided the $240,000 amount as our estimate as what would be needed considering the anticipated carry forward. So there's certainly no disagreement about the dollars. It's both prefer one time.
yeah, it's just a technical move.
Within the, and those were the only changes,
That's pretty
frankly,
boring.
to the agency of administration, the executive office for finance and management. So, yeah, I mean, the House, I think did good work. They did due diligence, and I would hasten to add our budgets were pretty plain vanilla. I mean, there really wasn't a lot emphasized there.
What's the percentage increase for your department?
For the agency of administration, there was actually a fairly steep increase in general fund, but that had to do with 2 initiatives that were, well, one initiative and one transfer of a position within the agency. The initiative is the language access plan. That is both a one-time initiative in the budget of $2.3 million that the House reduced to 1.5. But also there's a base funding amount of $700,000 ongoing. And that's to acknowledge the fact that once this plan is instituted and gets going and does the various things necessary to translate English into various languages and the like, there will be ongoing costs. I mean, this stuff has to be updated. Every time you guys change the law, you have to change the language in the law. So, and there'll be, many other things to do. So we thought it was appropriate to make sure that we weren't shorting the base. So there was a $700,000 amount put into the agency of administration secretary's office base amount, which, considering that their general fund was only a little over $1 million, that's a pretty hefty increase. There was one more change, and that is within the agency net neutral, but it actually came from a transfer from finance and management budget office. We transferred a position that was a budget analyst, but the title was Director of Continuous Improvement. That position was really working very closely with the Chief Performance Officer, Justin Kenny's group, which was in the Agency of Administration. So we just figured, why don't we just make it happen? So we actually transferred that position from our department to the Secretary's department, or to the Agency of Administration budget. So those 2 increase, when you add those to the budget.
One is not.
One is net
It's
neutral.
just what budget it.
Well, it's a down for finance and management, general fund, it's an up for agency of
But
administration.
the agency as a whole.
Agency as a whole, it was
And can I add another
Yeah, yeah.
comment on that? So the $700,000 base general fund increase for the language access plan is a little bit misleading. So that is the biggest driver in what is actually, to your question, an 80% general fund increase year over year in the secretary's office, but that's going to go away in FY25. What I mean by that is the internal service funds, that will be built into the DHR internal service fund. And so that language access plan cost ongoing will be distributed like the other Office of Racial Equity expenses statewide. So that's going to, so we're going up this year, but that's going to come back out in FY25.
I'll just, yeah, that's true.
And so the internal service funds had already been allocated, prior to the governor's recommending this decision was made. So I just wanted to note that on that.
And
Yeah,
within,
but that's in the base though?
It is.
that will be in the base, but it'll
It's in the
be
base this year.
within the internal service funds next year.
So why wouldn't we just deal with that S bridge one time until we distribute it through everybody's budget?
And that's a perfectly reasonable suggestion. And I think the reason why is that this
It's
700,
reasonable,
there's
or-
already another one time, okay? And the House went and cut it in half. So we did the one-time appropriation for the language access plan already. And that's for the one-time project over 2 years to translate all existing documents that need to be translated. We wanted to clearly identify that there's also, besides the one-time project, an ongoing need of 700 a year. And that's why it was broken out in the strategy. If it was all lumped into one $3 million one time, and then after it left the governor's desk, it got cut in half, that would have affected this base need, and it make it a little more complicated to convey what's already, I'm struggling, is a complicated
I think I got it now. I understand because we set up how we did it with the internal service fund. Although we know that the cost doesn't go away, it's just being spread, right?
So, but
Like we did with,
we would
a number of
by
things.
no means oppose if the Senate wished to put it all in one-time appropriation, but knowing that a certain portion of that would then be incorporated in the internal service fund on an ongoing basis, that works.
but how that will materialize across all of state government in those budgets. It's relatively small.
Little things here and there, though. start
I
to
know,
add up.
I'll add up, that's true, but that's your plan. Sounds reasonable.
Within finance and management also, there was some movement. In addition to sending one position to the agency of administration, within finance and management, we also transferred a position from a vacant analyst position from the budget office down to financial operations. So there too is net neutral.
Where was Ruth Ellen's position, finance?
That's in financial operations, and that is now filled by Joe Harris upon Ruth Ellen's retirement. And we did that simply because we had this vacant analyst position for a while. We think we have 5 budget analysts. We're comfortable with that number. But also we were thinking ahead with this very large employee enterprise resource plan, the ERP project that's going to ultimately replace BTHR, Vision, Vantage, and also provide hopefully some help with transportation and BDOL. Large project and a lot to do with finance and management, particularly when they start replacing Vision, which is our statewide accounting system, and a big deal. And Vantage, which is our budgeting system, a smaller deal. Vision is really the main show. But anyway, we just need resources to deal with that. And so we had an available analyst position. They had need in FinOps, so we sent it down there. So if you look through the finance and management budget compartment of the budget, you'll notice that there's a general fund down. You'll notice within FinOps, there's a FinOps up. There's also a bit of a fund change in that the general fund, which is predominantly in budget office, is being transferred down to financial operations, which is predominantly internal service. I'll follow you out.
Okay.
Anyway, I mean, there's,
Updating or replacing?
it would be a replacement.
Thank you.
We don't know.
Um,
Be replacement.
So
Is it out to bid? right
it
now?
would be, yes, the implementer of the project is being out to bid. The software has been determined to be Workday as the software platform.
Workday.
Workday.
It's gonna be huge.
It will be. Sweet project.
Yeah, through all state government, everybody has to learn.
This was funded over the past 2 years in budgets. It's a total of $24 million. So
The human capital management system replacement was funded in Act 70. Was it 74 or 174?
We won't know.
Two big
We don't
bills
go by
ago.
act numbers. Can
So-
you just tell
so
us what the bill was?
In 74, the 22 big bill, that funded the HCM, the human capital management, which is the BTHR replacement and the budget system. And then it was in Act 25, the FY 23 big bill, that an additional 11.8 million was funded for the financial system replacement. It has not yet been determined, but it will be soon, what the phasing process will be in terms of which goes first, which goes second.
How
And
you train everybody, how you roll that out.
that will certainly be a big part of the
You're
project.
looking forward to
No,
that?
I just imagine,
Yeah.
Just getting the
just so,
current
you know,
system mastered.
yeah, every little department throughout the state.
I would note that just a small component of vision is being changed. We're implementing a system called ET buys, which actually you guys may care about, since I think it will have an impact on payroll. Well, actually, no, I don't think it'll have an impact on payroll.
Procurement.
Purchasing in particular.
It's a purchasing system.
And this is a small thing, and yet we have spent an enormous amount of time in finance and management, FinOps. And that's all coming out of our budget, which is fine. I mean, state funds are state funds, but we just realized that without additional support in FinOps for the new, replacement vision, there wouldn't be enough hours a day. So that's why that transfer happened. I don't pretend that it's only going to require one FTE, but I do pretend it will require at least that. So we're trying to use available resources. We always come down on departments when they ask for additional positions. We always say, can't you find one internally? And, so we're trying to, in that regard, lead by example, but we did fortuitously happen to have an analyst position that's been open for a while.
Well, there's a lot going on in IT. Obviously, we use some of this money. Department of Labor was in, they were talking about, they're close to selecting a vendor for the replacement system. We have $30 million that we allocated for replacement, and no one's questioning the need to do that.
No.
So
that's really, I mean, in terms of,
So I
when we
do have
reported
one
on our
thing
budget,
that,
that's really, yeah.
And I guess I should wait until HR director, commissioner comes in, but the whole issue around replacing our antiquated classification system and the Willis system. And we've put money in to really take a look and get proposals. It's got so many steps, so many different complexities. Everybody wants to move step by step to maximize pay. Then we get major reclassification requests, and they carry a lot. Of course, the state police just got 8% increase. And so is that on your radar? Are you looking at that? I mean, how much progress are we making? What's the next step? Because you talked about the human capital management system, but obviously the human capital are the employees of the state. So it just connects, to that. So I'm just wondering where we stand. Am I going to be dead and gone before that happens? Probably.
Yes. You will.
That's encouraging. Because I plan to live quite a long time.
But isn't that just part of the whole contract? bargain.
Does it have to be bargained? It does?
Almost certainly.
Yeah, I would think so,
Almost.
yeah.
I mean, I don't think we could just impose a new system, and that's part of the challenge. And Commissioner Fasigi, I'm sure be very happy to come in here and talk to you about it, but I've sat through kind of one preliminary round with a consultant that we had hired who was familiar with the original Willis system. Willis, I think, is dead and buried. I don't think he or she, I think it was a he, exists anymore.
Well, I remember when the
There's
system
2 or 3
came in.
states that still use Willis, if that,
Mhm.
including Vermont. So it is an effort that is what I would call ongoing, but I don't think, right now DHR is focused 99% of their resources on reading and keeping them happy. That has been an enormous effort. And, we were meeting this morning, in fact, with some folks in the House that wanted to ask kind of what our vision is on that. And so we
That magically you're gonna be able to expand the workforce.
But what are we doing because we don't have access to magic? And actually, the commissioner has some pretty, she, for example, demonstrated a dashboard that gives us real-time evidence of where we are, within each department, what the vacancy rate is, how long each job rec requires to be filled. What's the time allotted to that? A month, 2 months, how many times posted? So, I mean, we're taking it very seriously, but that's been really, I would say, probably 99% of the focus in DHR. It's that challenging, and it's not, I would argue, it's not government-wide, it's department-specific. Within finance and management, for example, now admittedly, we're only 25 people, but we've got 1 vacancy, just recently.
That's not 1 in 25.
Vacancy rate within DHR actually is sub 5%. Within tax, I believe, is the same. So it's not in every department. It is in.
A lot depends on the nature of the job and.
Absolutely.
I mean, what's been surprising is in A&R, the technical staff that they've been able to hire. They were saying the more general the kind of job, it's where they're experiencing the difficulty. But, some of the engineers and whatever seem to be filling those positions based on what Secretary Moore was telling us. So it is, and then of course you've got very specific and difficult work environments like working in correctional facilities that where you have very high vacancies.
But I would acknowledge that the Willis system that we use does tie our hands somewhat. And that's not a complaint. That's merely a fact. And frankly, we've learned to work within it. We've learned to do what we can do within the system, but it's clunky and frankly, it's antiquated. So I would agree with your point. We need to use
And I
it.
don't-
Go ahead.
Are there other systems like a new bill system like that other states use, or is it just done without us?
No, there are other systems. Don't ask me which one, but I remember seeing them several years ago when we were going through this consultant that was looking at these systems. There are others out there.
So I was just wondering where it stood, and I guess Beth can give us some idea of where.
Yeah.
And you can say right now it's on hold because of all the other work, but is it ever going to come back on? It is an antiquated system.
You probably have to have the union as well to see.
So Star.
I can't answer, oh, I'm sorry.
Well, I just don't know of any business that isn't short employees. And, whether it's a federal government, I mean, they can't find custom officers and have got borders shut down because they don't have any personnel there. Up north, the Indian had a Columbia Forest Products, the maple outfit up in Island Pond that needs people to gather sap and help in that business. They're advertising big ads in the paper, Ethan Allen Furniture, IBM probably, used to be IBM. I think they're short people.
They just laid off.
Logit Supply is on TV every night, our morning advertising. So if we're only running on 5% or so labor shortage in the state.
But we aren't, and like
Some
some
of them are
corrections,
larger.
it was like, it started at 30%, maybe dropped down to about 25%.
Incorrect.
Yes.
Yeah,
So
but that's
well,
a
but you've
totally
got,
different job.
I
and
agree.
we're paying them way beyond what.
well, I think that's what
Reasonable.
Adam is saying, is that the workforce problems vary tremendously depending on the nature of the job and the function of state government. So, under 5% is just considered normal churn, because people retire, people change jobs, et cetera. So, that's normal. But you never get to 100%, or you do for a short period.
Very
So the base budget's always assume a certain amount of vacancy savings.
Yeah.
So what else you wanna tell us?
That's, in terms of our budget,
Pretty straightforward.
it's pretty straightforward. There were a couple more one-times that I thought I might just mention.
Is that the new thing, putting labels on coats outside?
Well, it says Brooks Brothers on it. I don't know. I suppose I could cut that. Perhaps I'm supposed to cut that off.
And I think Brooks Brothers would like you to keep it on.
How long have you had that? Years?
I purchased this when I took my job with the state and I need to change my wardrobe. So that was just a few years ago.
Yeah,
3 years ago.
I think actually their manufacturers are starting to do that. It's a form of advertising for them. Apparently you're advertising.
They should be paid.
Yeah, LL Bean,
On camera,
LL
on
Bean.
On camera,
I
nice
Right,
looking
that's-
jacket.
I certainly thank the chair for pointing out something I had not previously noticed, and perhaps
They're observant, huh?
if it's.
Senator Westman will tell you how observant I am.
Sorry.
All right, any other questions for Adam?
Well, we had two other kind of one-time appropriations that are not strictly within AOA, but they're, I guess, were in GovRep, part of the AOA budget. One is the Senator Sears's violence program. That I noticed passed the Senate with no appropriation.
Because we did exactly what we always do. We take it out and put it on our list.
5 million.
So we had asked for 10, the House made it 5, just for your radar. Similar, oh, and the other interesting thing is, because we just weren't certain at the time when we initiated that appropriation where it should go, we directed it to the Agency of Administration. The bill that Senator Sears and co wrote directs that money to the BDH. We're fine with that. We noticed that the House passed bill directs it to the Agency of Administration. I think the intent in the bill anyway is to direct that to BDH. So, that's obviously dealer's choice. If you want to direct it to BDH, we're fine. But the original recommendation was AOA because we simply didn't have any other
But there's
place.
also language in that bill to utilize potential federal funding sources first.
That's correct, right.
And so exactly how much of that 10, because there's a recently passed bill on community violence prevention in Congress. I don't know what that funding will look like, but in fact, it seems like it's on the surface intended to address the similar needs. So you want to take a look at that. The one-time list is fairly expensive, as you can imagine.
The one other one time that I would note that also was to the agency administration is the FEMA denial reserve. That was a $15 million reserve we set up. Actually, I don't know if it was a reserve per se, it was an appropriation in a way to use to backfill denied FEMA claims. Inevitably, some will happen. We're pretty good about figuring out what they'll take, what they won't, but sometimes we get them wrong, and sometimes we're kind of knowledgeable that we're pushing the envelope here, but we submit anyway. You never know. So most of that 15 million one-time appropriation came from Human Services, based on their measurement of their claims and which part of their claims were high risk. They ranked by risk, high, moderate, and low, each of their claims. And so they simply took the high-risk claims and, added them up, and it came out with 15 million. The House,
We now did, oh gosh, the consultants take a look at that.
They are it's the consultants that perform the risk ratings.
I would think so.
And so the $15 million number was not, it did not come from throwing a dart at a dartboard. It came from, these are the high risk. And so, there was work behind that. Yes, there was work behind that informed that number.
So is that just for FEMA, or also, is there a similar fund for ARPA high risk?
it was specific.
This is specifically only FEMA. Yeah.
So, in terms of House differences with GovRec, that's it.
What did they do with the FEMA?
They reduced that from 15 to 5
And so,
in the House.
And
so where'd that extra 10 go?
Well, you
Yeah.
have to look at
To
their
the
budget.
various initiatives that were put in there. In that regard, I don't know how many of you have read through the letter that Secretary Clauser issued to you, but one of the things we
The
mentioned.
one from 2 days ago?
Right here.
So
But the 10 actually was in Human Services. And you extracted that from their budget.
No, what they're
No.
doing is setting aside money for disallowed federal claims.
Yes,
Yeah.
that,
Yeah, so that was never budgeted,
but that fund is existed.
but the
A long
FEMA
time.
emergency,
Well, there's a FEMA federal fund that exists, but it typically has a negative balance.
that's what we use for the match on
No.
disasters and
Yeah.
stuff.
Yeah, but we've had a fund like that for years.
Oh, you mean a denial fund?
Yes, the denial fund we've had for years, because a lot of times what happens, you have regions that have, and you have to go over a certain level to get
Yeah,
to
million bucks.
the federal, but we've had a fund for years.
Well, you have, but oftentimes it doesn't have much in it.
Right. Are you
And,
talking about the ERAF fund, the emergency?
No,
relief?
I'm talking about the emergency fund we've had, one place or another, we've had for years in.
you're talking about budget
So
stabilization.
you've talked about the match on FEMA, that's the emergency.
That's
rep
ERAP.
fund. But when we have denials, I think we have it on peak and backfill in places from emergency pieces that Irene would be. I don't know if there were many denials in that, but this is sort of coming out of the pandemic and the change in FEMA that happened in July, right? The way they are viewing claims now, on particularly in the AHS
So,
world.
but to get to Rich's comment.
Yeah.
He's not talking about ERAP.
No, I'm talking, we had, if I go back to the
He probably
summer,
rated it.
the summer of Irene, early in that year, in the northern part of the state, we had flooding. And that fund, they started to use in Johnson to fund that. And
What
then
fund-
Irene
What fund are you
happened
talking
For a
about?
denied claim,
for denied, well,
What-
because it wasn't
is that what
there.
you're saying?
Yes,
What fund,
I'm
I'm
not
not
lost
familiar
to
with
what
any
fund.
fund.
Yeah.
I'm just wondering whether it's the ERAF fund that we
Yeah,
usually use for federal match for transportation projects. That's not the fund?
But it's also been used, I think, for local match sometimes, because that's how it started, the ERAP fund. But I'm just drawing a blank on the denied claim piece of it. That's all.
we've had money in that fund, and it's always been going to fund.
But it's a good idea.
It's a great idea.
It's a great idea if you have the money, and, at this point, we figured we did have the money, but more importantly, we figured at some point, we're gonna have to come up with the money, so that's why we
well, potentially.
potentially, Right.
What you're doing is ensuring.
And say that
right,
Of a
we'd rather not be
disallowance.
caught short, so.
um,
Anyway, that's all within, AOA.
I would probably mention, before wrapping up on AOA, just the insurance is actually, the largest in terms of dollars part of the AOA business unit. And so, we're looking at just in terms of the high level numbers, the budget includes increases of 8% in what we collect for workers' comp, collected through the internal service fund, 10% for general liability, collected through the internal service fund, and 7% for the all other insurances fund. In terms of scale, work comp is going from 13.1 million in 23 to 14.3, so a little over $1 million up. 6.3 million in general liability, 6.9, and all other insurance 4.7 to 5.0. So I just wanted to give a mention to what are substantial costs spread statewide that are housed within the risk management department within.
I haven't had an insurance bill come in yet this year. It hasn't gone up quite a bit, whether it's auto, home, liability, every one of them.
No, you don't usually see a decrease.
No, sizably.
Other questions for? All right, Senator Sears had to leave to back to Bennington, and Senator Lyons has had a meeting with House Committee, I think, on a bill that passed. So,
Were we expected to cover the executive office as well?
you can, but what,
I can do a 1-sentence summary.
we have to pay the governor, is that what you're saying?
Yes, we're continuing to pay the governor and the governor's staff. The headcount and organizational structure is not changing at all from FY23. If you back out the increases for benefits, insurance costs, internal service fund increases like the ones I just described, which we gave our budget instructions to departments that they would be held harmless on those increases, but not considering any of those increases, we wanted departments to be held to 3%. So he came in at 3.0% right on target, but after these subsequent increases were determined after the budget instruction, after the budget deadline, they're at about 5.1%. But anyway, not much to see there, but I offer the report on behalf of the government. So.
Any other questions? I don't know whose section of the budget, but, oh, it's yours, Andy? You're the lucky winner lately. Okay. Oh, well, thank you for finishing up our day here. Tomorrow we are starting at 1, and
It's always a pleasure.
just,
Sometimes.
and I'll
we're
announce it
starting at
tomorrow, a 1
sometimes
tomorrow afternoon.
Tomorrow's Friday.
Tomorrow's Friday, we're
Good
on
to see
the board
Is that
11:30.
your best?
Good seeing you.
Thanks.